there. Stephanie Stevenson here, otherwise known as watercolor artiste in social media circles. I am the artist of midlifeartist.com, and I like to welcome you to my channel and to my live stream. This is about the only, whoop, am I on? Testing, testing, am I on? I think the lighting is a little off. Didn't look like that in the, there we go. All right, it's a little better. Seemed like I was in the dark there. But welcome to my live stream. I was torn as to which painting I was going to work on tonight. I've got three in progress, and as if you've joined in any live stream, I typically will tell you that my live stream on Wednesday nights is to keep me painting at least once a week, if not more. But at least Wednesday nights keeps me accountable to myself and to my friends who join in. Hey, Frosty, welcome. Welcome. Staying warm, I hope, up there in New England. Uh, we're pretty chilly down here. We're below freezing at night and in the 40s during the day, at least for this week. So it's pretty chilly for Northwest Georgia. But anyway, if you've joined, you know that I do the Wednesday nights to keep myself accountable, to chat with friends, and to see progress unfold as I work. And for anyone interested in seeing how I go about my artwork, that's there for you too. You know, I'm not exactly the most interesting person. I am, the midlife artist. So I'm in my 50s and I lead pretty much a boring life. It's busy, but it's boring busy. So, but anyway, I figured I'd start off tonight with my watercolor painting that is being done for my sister-in-law, Lisa. She's an author, and she wrote a short story. And it's definitely a short story, but was well written. I enjoyed reading it, and she asked me if I'd be willing to do a cover image for her short story, and I am. And her short story is entitled Glass Lake, and that's all I'm going to say about it. So I'll start off with that, but because it's watercolor, and oftentimes watercolor needs to dry between layers, I'm not sure I'd be able to work on it the full hour and a half um, without muddying it up. So I'm going to start off with that, and when I think it's saturated, or if I fear I'm going to start muddying it up, I'll switch to either my Amazon or Nancy Wake, which are the other two paintings I've got going on. So I figured I'd do a little something different, like I said, watercolor, and I'll show you which paints I'm using, which brushes I'm using, how I got to the image thus far when you see it, and go from there. Um, in the way of news, like I said, I lead a boring life, busy but boring. It's been chilly. We dodged the weather bullet last weekend for us. We were in a zone that was anticipating freezing rain and icing and some snow. We were going to get all three. But it turned out that the worst of it was, I believe, Saturday morning. I had taken a little video of me taking Jackpot out. I think I shared that on Truth Social. I didn't share that everywhere. Um, and it was freezing rain, sleet, some snow had fallen, and then it turned to rain for the rest of the weekend for us. We ended up being in a wedge of warmer temperatures that enabled us to be above freezing. So we ended up lucking out, being blessed not to have that bad weather. And then Monday morning came in the cold blast of frigid air. But most of the roads were already treated in our area. So we were okay. We never lost power. However, east and west of us was hit pretty hard, especially in areas of Mississippi, which is the state I was born in, incidentally. I was born in the South, but I was raised in New England, so I consider myself a mutt. I'm half Yankee, half Southern, so that makes me a I was going to say oddity, but I'm going to say prodigy instead. I identify as a prodigy, and I can redefine that any way I want in this era of redefining words, right? So, anyway, I've got a Southern mom and a Yankee dad. I love them both, and they support me in my artistic endeavors. So yeah, I'm a mutt. Uh, anyway, uh, I am going to be working on putting up a web page on my website. My website is midlifeartist.com, where I will entertain commissions. I am working on putting together a commission contract that I'll have drafted and at the ready. Even when I'm ready to take a commission in an official capacity, I've collabed with my husband on his project, but he's my husband. We don't need a contract. We have a contract. It's called marriage, and I made him marry me twice. Ask me about that someday. And then um, uh, I am collaborating with my sister-in-law to do some covers for her writings. She's got a novel that she's working on um, that I will be working on a cover for her. Hasn't been started yet. I got to finish at least one of these paintings before I can move on to a new one. So anyway, so yeah, I will be entertaining at some point in the future commission work, but I'm laying the groundwork now to find a contract that I can adapt to me and my ability to commit, which is my time frame, my style, that type of thing. And I will be putting it up on the website, and then I'll have gateways where I'm like, I'm entertaining commissions, feel free to contact me. And of course, I'll have, boundaries set that will help me be able to do those, but set expectations. So I'm working on that in the background. I need to do another blog post on my website. I don't even know what to talk about other than my boring life. Anyway, oh, also, if you follow the Artist Corner on True Social or X, my husband's going to be the featured artist with Lady Hamilton on Saturday night, I believe it is. So tune in. You'll get to see my husband and what he's worked on as an artist, and he'll probably talk about what he's working on in terms of his tabletop RPG project. So yeah, Saturday. So Saturday night, 7 p.m. Eastern on Lady Hamilton Art Rumble channel. I believe she's also on YouTube under Headmaster. Well, shoot, I can't remember the account. But on Rumble, it's Lady Hamilton Art, I'm pretty sure. Um, and she'll be posting, we'll be sharing the link to that. So if you're interested in seeing my husband interviewed about his artwork and his project, especially if you're into tabletop role playing games, then that's the interview to watch. So, anyway, that's the news from Northwest Georgia. It's about time I get underway. So, again, I'm going to start with my watercolor and then maybe move on to one of these because I can move on to my Nancy Wake because I got a sketch. I got to do the posters. And so I've got a sketch of how I'm going to place the lettering and her face on one so I can keep it in the right spot. Same with the lettering on this one over here. So I may do that tonight, depending on how much time is left. So I've got prep work there. Okay, let's see about moving my palette cam, which is now my painting cam for the time being. So let's move this over. And then we will turn off my camcorder and see if my refresh. Come on now. All right. My my palette cam died. That's just great because I had it off, I guess. Hopefully I can get it working. Oh, bummer. Let's see if this will work. I lost the feed. Figures. I'll try one more refresh, and if not, I'm going to have to refresh. Will it work? All right, my apologies. This was supposed to work. I'm going to turn my camcorder back on while I work on this. I use my palette cam through my old phone here, because what are you going to use your old phones for once you've replaced them? They've got cameras, so they're a backup. And so I gotta I gotta reset this thing. Oh, bear with me. It's also very slow. It's one of the reasons I had to upgrade for this, because um, because one, it was slow. It had too much on it, and when I went to do my tent events, I needed a better phone anyway that would handle tap to pay with my website. So I needed to do that, and so I had to get a new phone. Start. Aha. Okay. Eventually, I got to get this more streamlined, I think, because if I don't use it on the live stream, I guess it cuts out for some reason. I don't know why that is. Another thing for me to learn. Let's turn off my camcorder real quick. There it is. Okay. All right. So sorry for the moving. Hopefully you don't have motion sickness. There we go. Just about there. Hopefully it doesn't die on me. All right. So now you see it's not palette cam. It is painting cam. All right. Let me know if you guys can see that okay before I proceed. Yes, Zin Gansai paints. Absolutely. Hey, how are you tonight? We turned out the lights. That's my husband. I love you, buddy. You're my sweetheart. All right. And now my glasses are fogging up because I got hot. Woohoo, fun times. Woohoo. Okay. Let's see if I can lock this down. Hopefully my cam does not. But anyway, this is my Karutaki paint set. It looks like that. It's been up against oily stuff from my oil paints, so I've had this placed. But on the flip side of the cover here, it gives you a place to swatch the colors. And so therefore, now of course it's in Japanese, so you can't read it, but they do have the colors in English. But you can see now, these are the colors I've been using on this watercolor. And so those are that's the palette I'm working from. And again, this is a watercolor on, I'll tell you, this is cold press paper. It is Artistico, Fabriano Artistico. I love Fabriano. I learned to love them when I was in college. I would always get their papers for drawing and for watercolor. This is 100% cotton, cold pressed paper, and the size is 10 by 14. So I also have a pad of this in the hot pressed, which is a smoother paper. It has a smoother feel. This has texture to it where the hot press does not. So if you're not familiar with watercolor, that is the basics of the paper. You've seen my paints. I do have other paints that I put in here. This is a travel palette. I use it. I use these as well. These are pastel watercolors that I put in here. That I've used those on other watercolors that I've done for my husband's project, on some of the watercolors I've done for him. But I use, you can tell I use the paint tins here to mix colors. So I have that at the ready. And then the other thing to learn is the only ones that are shiny when dry in is the graphite ones. There's a palette. I'm not using graphite here. This has been, but you can't see a shininess to this, even in the light. There's no shininess to this because I haven't used the graphite version. Let me see if I can find the graphite version real quick, because well, oh, you know what? They must be in my drawer. But these are the Castle watercolor swatches here, by the way, which is in this palette. So you can see how pretty these colors come out. And Castle is not a bad brand. It's not well known like some of the very professional artistic ones, but I've painted with these and they're beautiful, very luminous, by the way. So they're a great option. Let's see here. I'm trying to find my graphite ones. I must have them. Oh, you know what? I might need my sponges. We'll see. Another tool I use in watercolor is sponges because they give you a texture. Let's see here. Trying to find my graphite watercolors. I love them, but they can dry shiny because graphite is shiny. So if you're afraid of that, I would not advise using those. But if you really like a dark color, well, I don't have them out at the moment. I'm a little concerned that I don't have them at the ready, but I wasn't planning on using them with this painting. So just going to make sure that that's okay. All right. So yeah. Um, but yeah, there's a strip of them, Zen, that are really dark, but they really do give you a nice dark coloring. When you really need to go dark, those are it. But they can have a shiny effect, especially the deeper and more opaque you go with them. I think if you keep them more translucent, less opaque, you don't, you use more water than you do the paint, it won't be as bad. But it is got graphite in it. Now, one of the things I did with this, how I arrived at this image, is there's very pure white areas on this painting. I'll bring it up close. Yeah, Gunsai, it's just the graphite one. So pay attention if you go to get any of these are not graphite. You should be fine with these. Like I said, I'm doing these and I don't have any shine whatsoever. But if it's graphite, it'll say graphite. When you get the graphite ones, that you can run into trouble with shininess if you're not interested in shiny. Now these areas of pure white, were preserved using um, drawing gum. Let's see here. So this is a liquid mask or frisket in airbrushing circles. If you've done airbrushing, you know what frisket is. This is a liquid frisket. And so I used a paintbrush to paint on areas of this that I wanted to preserve pure whites. And now some of that I'm still going to come in with some paint in some areas, but I'm not going to obscure all of them. I think what I'm going to work on at this point is the foreground. The foreground is the cover on the dock for which she is standing on, the dock itself, and her. They are the darkest elements, and um, that'll bring them forward some and bring some more depth to this, because this is not as faded a landscape in the distance as they normally would do it. This is faded, but this gets closer in the midground. And some of this tree here is actually foreground as well and needs to have some more darker to come in. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to work on the foreground elements. And then, like I said, if it gets too wet, and I'm afraid I might get it muddy, I will set it aside and try one of the other paintings. Okay, so it can be frustrating if you're not used to working with it, Frosty. Um, a lot of people are scared of it because it's about water control and paint control. A lot of people think the key is water control, and that is true. There is water control, but you also need to know your paints, and you need to know how to carry water in your paints. For instance, here's my paint brushes um, that I use. I use these kind here. These are, I forget what they're called, what kind, but they're, when they're wet, they come to a point, so you can get some specificity with the point, or you can do wide swaths by, pressing down and bringing it out. So um, these are great. This is a size 4, the big one. The smallest one is size 1 and a size 2. I like those. For those, I do have more um, more detailed brushes here. They all come to a point. And then I have my big flat brush here for wide swaths. So like, for instance, I'm probably going to use it on the deck here to get some wide swath of color. And then, of course, you have your water cup. Some people like to have 2 of these, one to really get dirty water and the other one to really clean the brush. Or you dip in to clean your brush in the dirtiest water, and then you dip into the next one, which is less dirty, and it helps clean your. I don't do that. I keep paper towels. But anyway, I'm going to start with this one to work on this and see if I can't get some color into this. Some of this is wet wood that's very reflective of the sky, and so it's actually very bright. So I'm going to probably remove some of the paint that ends up going, but I'm going to get some base here and then some base brown like I have here, and then over here, and then get the darker brown. And so when I do that, excuse me, I'm going to choose probably a combination of this and my brown right here, these two, and get them mixing on my palette here. So I'm dipping into the water. Water control. The more water you have, the more transparent and loose it is, and the wetter the paper is going to get. So, and again, I'm not using these paints. I'm using my Karataki. I'm not sure how you say it. So I'm mixing them right here, the brown and the burnt sienna. And I got a good mix of water and paint that it's not going to be too watery. In fact, um, I'm probably going to add a little bit of water to this because I want to keep it loose. There we go. And then if I want to spread it without adding more color, I add more water to the brush and I bring it onto the paper. I am not, I mean, despite my my nickname on social media circles being watercolor artiste, I did pride myself on being a watercolor artiste in my college days. And so that nickname is actually very, very old. I've had watercolor artiste as a nickname for a long time. Um, see what, see, I don't know if you're seeing what I'm doing here. Again, this could be confusing because I'm using the palette of the other watercolors, but and what I'm doing is just getting the deck here. I'm adding more water as I go, pulling more color, and it's always okay to go lighter than darker at first because you can build up. Now, if you want to take out some of this for highlights, you can see how I'm pulling out some of the color again, but there's like a slight stain. You see that? And in my reference photo, this is kind of reflective of the sky in the reference. So I'm going to get more paint on my, you can see right there I'm making that brown. It can be frustrating, but especially if you've not practiced with it before, um, it can be scary to some. And I got a great big swatch of color that's a little too dark for me, so I'm going to add a little more water, spread it around with my brush. And again, you can build up color. If you feel like you're going too light, you can build up color um, without having big splotches of. I'm trying to preserve some of the lightness of the deck here. And I'm going to build up the darker areas with future layers. So that's what I'm doing here is these areas here are a little darker. And if you still work wet on wet, sometimes you can pick up the color and not intend to. That's why you have to decide if you're going to work in layers or if you're going to try to paint more as if it's acrylic or oil where you're painting the intentional color without building layers. And this is just a tissue, like a facial tissue. I can use paper towels, but my paper towels have a texture to them. And when I lift up, the texture comes up. And so this is still wet. It's damp. In fact, you can now start seeing that, I don't know if it'll show up, but this is now starting to buckle because it's wet. But it's staying down because this is one of those pads that when you're done, you take a razor blade and lift the paper up. But it's got some lift on this corner here because I've worked on it. You see this right here, I'm going to bring it up close so you can see, is when you work wet on wet, you can get this cauliflower um, effect, which is usually a sign that maybe you didn't intend to do that. And that's part of the process of wet on wet. And if you want to take up, see how it's now coming up again? This is damp. And I'm coming in with a wet brush And I'll show you if I can lift this right back up to show you how it works. So this is not completely dry. It may feel dry to the touch, but it's not. And now you see I've lifted it up. So, and I'm not worried about it because when this dries, I can come in and repaint that in another layer. So it's not like it's, you're ruining the paper or the painting. You can definitely come back in with water if you want this to be a little bit lighter than what came up. I can come in just with water and pull this right back out, especially if if it's 100% cotton. If you're dealing with a blend on the paper, so it's a cotton blend, some other kind of material, you will not get the same effect. Paper is probably the most important part of watercolor. And 100% cotton paper can be expensive. But if you're wanting to do a really nice watercolor, that's what you do. You use the 100% cotton. So now what I'm going to do, let me see if I can show you the photo. I don't know if I can do that. Let's see here. I'll do an image, glass lake image. I gotta find it in my, I'll see if I can't find it real quick and show it to you. Artwork references. Aha, there it is. Okay. Let's see if I can show it to you. Trying to see it. You can, I don't know if you can see it on the screen here. Can you see it on the screen? Let me know if you can see the image. I'll stop the mobile for a second. Only for a second though. So what you see there is the reference photo. And you can see from the reference photo, can you guys see it? I hope you guys can. Yes, okay. I want to get big here so you can see it. But you can see the decking here. And you can see it's reflecting the light of the sky pretty well. And so how I'm going to deal with that on my painting is I'm going to get dark on these edges and corners, and then those lines and some of the knots and whatever I'm going to get painted in. And that's perfectly fine, Frosty, when you talk about painting with as little water as possible. You can do that. And in fact, I've done that as well. You, there's a use, there's a purpose for each method. And it's called, you got a method of wet on wet, wet on damp, and wet on dry. You would most likely do a wet on dry painting. But you would have to still build layers, I would think, because if you kept going over the painting, I'm going to lock this and unshow it and put on my, you know, but if you try to go repaint over something and it's still wet like here, it will lift the paint. So as long as you're okay with working in layers, even still, despite the fact that you would be wet on dry, which is exactly what you would probably want to do, then you still have to work layers and build it up. So, and this is considered, it feels dry to the touch, but it's actually cold dry, which means it's damp right here, and it's buckled. This will dry flat again over time as it dries out. I'm going to work on the deck here, the cover, and I'm going to pick one of my smaller brushes here to show you what that looks like here. So this is wet, and you can see that it's got a point to it, but it's actually carrying water in that part of the brush. So you always keep paper towels handy, and this will give you a nice edge. And so what I'm going to do is get some. Now I've already got a base, and this will reactivate on the palette here. I'm adding more water. You can see it's kind of runny. I'm going to show it real close for you. You can see how runny it is. And if I add more water, it's now even more transparent. And when it's more transparent, there's less color going on to the thing. So so if I wanted to put some brown on this, I would, and I'm just going straight up with it. I'm keeping it right to the edges where I want it to be. I'm just laying another layer down, and that's already darkened. And that's with a layer of transparency. And then this one, I'm doing the same thing. I've got my water thing in the way. It made me bump my hand. But this isn't bad. Once you get used to working with water, it's really not so scary. It really isn't. And like I said, as long as it's wet, you can most likely, especially if you made an oops, you can pull it right back up. Like, oh no, I painted over here. Let me lift it right back up. And it comes right up, as long as it's wet or damp. Okay. But again, if I go back into painting this, I'm going to actually lift more paint off than I want. And I don't want to do that. And then I'm going to add more of the black to this brown, get a little darker. So I'm mixing the brown and the black from the pans. And I got a lot of color in there. It's still watery, but not as translucent. So watch what I do here. I really want to make this background dark. You can see, let's see if I can do this so you can see it. And this is damp, but it's also dark. So it's not, got more opaqueness. Trying to do this while holding it up and holding my hand steady. So, but I want you guys to see what I'm doing. So, you see how dark that came up. And now that was still damp, but because it was such a dark color that I was bringing in, it wasn't lifting the color. And so I want to do that same thing over here. So I'm going to take some of that. Again, it's about color and water control. So I want to be able to extend this this color all the way up without having to add too much more water. So here we go. I'm going to do this here. You see how that's coming in. And when you work with layers and the layers dry in between work sessions, it's working wet on dry again. So once it's dry, the paint doesn't come back up. So you want to make sure you make any corrections while the paint is either, the layer is either damp or wet. But yeah, you could easily do this, Frosty, wet on dry. You just have to be patient enough to do it in layers. You could easily do that. You can see how that just brought this in. Now I got to do that at the top. I'm going to stand up to do this. Sometimes you have to come at it from a different angle. Looking at it from down here, it's a little harder. And so I need more water because this isn't going to spread over. So I'm adding more water first to get enough. And now I'm going to add more of the paint color. And I'm not worried about completely matching the previous color here. This is a pretty dark color. So now you see I got pretty dark color. I got a lot of swatch color here. This should help me get this up here. Now I could use a bigger brush, or I can keep it to this one. But you can see that I'm laying down a good swath of color. This is a nice precise brush because it's got the point to it. But it also holds water, so you can do that kind of long form brush work. So yeah, I'm not as steady as I once was. But you can see how it's coming in. Now this will dry a little lighter as it dries. That's okay, because if it's too light when it dries, you can always come in with another layer. And eventually you'll get it to the darkness that you want. Sometimes I will use the graphite colors if I don't think I can get dark enough for some reason. But that does risk shininess to the original. Now what I'm going to do is I want to preserve that line. So I'm going to come in with the edge of my big brush and lift some of that back up if I can. So I'm taking the very edge of this brush, this flat brush, and I'm using the very edge, and I'm trying to pick up where I've overpainted on those edges. You can see where that line's coming back. And that's because the paper is still wet and I'm using a clean brush. Yeah, the brush is damp and that's okay. And then I'm using the very edge of that brush to kind of lift up some of this paint on those edges, because those are the edges of the joists of the overhang. And so sometimes it looks like it's coming up better over here, but not on this side. So you need to try to come in from the other side. Doing this left-handed is a little sketchy. I am right-handed. There we go. So you can see I'm lifting up the paint. There we go. Because I want those to show up a little bit better. And then when I do the next layer, I'm going to really kind of make some plank looking dark areas to show that it's wood. All right. Now she's very dark in the picture. I'm going to start doing something with her hair. Let's see here. But you can see how I can get precise edges if I have a steadier hand, that is, with the tip of this brush. But it also carries a lot of water in it, so I can then press down on it and make a wider swath. So that's how those brushes work. They're really good, especially once you get a good practice in them. How long to dry? It's not that long, especially on cotton. Um, Even on the blends, it's not that bad. Um, you could also, if you were interested in trying this, but you're not sure you could wait between layers, you could go wet on dry. And of course, when it's damp like these areas are, you can then come in with a hair dryer and dry it fast to get the next layer going. So there's always ways to cheat. But if it's super wet and the paint isn't even seeping into the paper yet, like super wet, and you do a hair dryer, it may push and make those cauliflower edges. So you would want to use a hair dryer when it's damp, not puddled or wet on wet. You'd want to let it get damp, dry uh, for a hair dryer because you don't want to move that paint around. This is not acrylic pour. This is watercolor. So like she's got red hair, but she's in shadow. So I need to preserve some of the oranges here and come in with layers of darker. Now I'm choosing, that's probably, well, you always go from bigger to smaller when it comes to brushes. So um, you can see here these brushes. This is bigger, this is slightly smaller, and this is smallest. Um, because I'm going to come in with another layer of brown while preserving some of this red. So again, um, this is too dark at the point, you know, and if I planned this better, I could have used the other, before I got it too dark for these areas, I could have used the reddish brown on this as a layer. Not a problem though. I'll get some more of the red in here. Add some more color, some more water. It's becoming a lighter brown, but I'm going to get some more of the red. I really load up the brush with the color, mix it in with the water, the swatch. So now I've got a reddish brown, okay? So what I suggest, if you've never really done watercolor, um, you could get a watercolor set, inexpensive if you don't have it already, and get a small 100% cotton sketchbook and just do some exercises where you're practicing brush work, water control, and color control. Practice wet on wet techniques, wet on damp techniques, and then wet on dry. So I'm not going to add any more water to this. I'm going to go ahead, and most of her hair is in shadow, but I don't want to lose the fact that it's red. So I'm trying to get another layer here that's darker. So that I'm building it up. This side has a little bit more brights. So I'm going to try to preserve the brightest brights, and I might have to pull out some of that color that I just laid down because I don't have the steadiest of hands. So I'm going to take one of my other brushes that's smaller, that has no paint on it, and just try to lift some of this up. Let's see if you can see that. And see, I'm lifting up that color again just by taking a wet brush, no paint. This is wet, but dabbed on the paper towels. And I'm just trying to pull some of the color back out because it's brighter on this side than the other. And so I'm trying to preserve those. I could try to dab it out with the paper towel, but when I do that, it's bigger splotches, and then I have to try to come back in, and then I'm lifting the paint because it's damp. So I don't want to do that. So I so I've got another layer. Her hair is darker and it's still reddish brown. And then I'll come in with a smaller brush on the next layer when it's dry, and be more specific with areas of darker brown. So we don't lose the red, and all that. But if I tried to do that now, I could be lifting up color. Her jacket is a ugly army greenish color. Let me show you what I'm thinking I might do with that. So I'm looking at these colors. There's this is kind of close to that green. So I'll probably use some of that with either the burnt umber, sienna, and or brown, and kind of get an army green going there, and come back in with another layer for her jacket. And so I'm going to use a slightly bigger brush, got to point to it, and be specific. Although before I do that, I'm going to work a little on the feathers of this dream catcher with a smaller brush, because I got some of this brown here, which would be perfect for that dream catcher. So try to use the same color where it makes sense to. Now this is a wet on dry right here, because this is all dry. And I'm just doing a wet on dry. Trying to get a feather look with a smaller brush. These are feathers. Again, this is wet on dry with a very uh, thin brush. Not the smallest brush that I have, but I'm trying to, and you can't see that very well, but again, I don't have, just like Lady Hamilton, I don't have fancy cameras. I don't get the fancy cameras. So I'm just trying to give a feathered look to these feathers, since I got some of that red brown. And try to bring some of that forward as well. And when you're working wet on dry, you have a lot more control. Activate hair dryer. Yeah, well, that's one way to do it. You just have to make sure you don't push color around accidentally that you don't want to push around. I don't do it. It helps me, to walk away from a painting if I've got it wet. It helps me not tinker with it too much. Um, so it gives me control. What happened with this white is when I laid down this drawing gum or liquid frisket. I let it dry, and then you can paint over it. You can do all kinds of things, and then let it dry. And then when you want to take up the gum so you can reveal the white underneath, you just rub it, or use an eraser and rub it off the. I just rubbed it off, and it reveals the white of the paper. So it really helps to preserve those whites if you're not a good planner. The other thing you can do, it's not as clean, but Zin might know, is that you can come in with gouache. Gouache is, um, opaque. It's like watercolor, but it's opaque. But the difference between watercolor and gouache is that watercolor will, once it's dry, like really dry, not damp dry, but dry, it won't reactivate, where gouache will with water. So gouache is, if you like oil painting and acrylic painting, you may want to try gouache first, but it's not the same beast as watercolor. And you have to recognize that. And I would suggest playing with both. Play with one first, play with the other second, so you can see how they interact, how they change their characteristics, things like that. But you can see I've just darkened that dream catcher with some of that same color. And that helps tie in areas of the composition. Let's see, maybe what I'll do is maybe I'll use a sponge. Maybe I'll do a sponge. I got these natural sponges that have obviously a texture to them, which can be unpredictable if you're not careful. If you want smaller texture, you can get sponges that have the smaller texture as opposed to the big. See how this is big, this got smaller. So depending upon what you're wanting to do, like this looks like it might be perfect for branches, where I might want to come in and kind of just sponge in some texture with paint, wet on dry, and get some branch effects, which I'm willing to try. But you want to get this sponge damp and then squeeze out as much excess water as possible, so you're not putting too much water on the surface. So it's water control. Water control. Um, let's see if I can't. And I keep a whole bunch of paper towels. That's still really dry. So let's see here. Let's see if I can do some branch work. Now the branches in my reference photo are pretty dark, but they're also snow laden. So I'm not sure how I'm going to accomplish that. But with what I'm seeing for color, it's going to be a green like this with maybe some of this blue here mixed together. That's what I'm thinking. Number 57 and number 67. All right. So that's what I'm going to attempt to do, is mix some of that. This might not be as successful as I'm thinking it will be, but that's okay. I'm not too worried about it. I try not to worry about things. So similar colors here from a previous session on this particular swatch here. I'm not going to use a ton of water just yet. I'm going to get the colors mixed. Right here to right here. So this is a nice greenish blue, very dark. Now I need to add a little bit of water. And I don't have enough color. I already know I don't. And also, I'm not sure how the sponge is going to accept this yet. So I am like I said, I want this to be just the texture of the sponge going onto the paper. I don't want this to be too wet. And I got a lot of this color on this painting, so I'm not worried that I'm mixing too much color or whatever. Let's see. Let's see if I can't get. Let's see if I can't get. I'm just touching And what happens is this, because it's a sponge, it picks up that, let's see. You see that? That's not bad. That's not bad at all. But you have to be careful because the sponge is going to pick up a lot of that water. And so that takes practice too. So I'm just touching this and not pressing it too much because I want to layer it. So yeah, so there I'm not painting individual needles of a pine tree. I'm using the texture of a sponge. And right now I could squeeze this and extra moisture is not going to come out, but it's just damp, just damp. Um, but I don't want to go over that now because it's damp wet now, and I don't want to lift up color, and I don't want to lose the texture that I've created. So I'm going to let that sit. But that's another way you can present texture or bring in, you know, a different look, especially in the foreground. And I know you're into detail, um, frosting, and so that'll help. You know, if you were to try it, that should help. So you got to look for, you know, different textures, what you're trying to accomplish. These are big, big bulbous textures that would not work well here. Um, so, but this small one does. So, and I got a bunch of these. I just have 3 out now, but anyway. And then let me do a little bit of her. Oh, you know what? It's 9 o'clock. Well, you know what? I'm going to continue working on this as much as I can. So, I think. I mean, I could bring over one of the other paintings and start on it. Let's see if I can reactivate this at all. Nope. So, right here, it's if this were gouache, this would reactivate. This is an old swatch, but I just added water and I'm trying to reactivate it and it's not doing anything. Same with this one. Now I can clean this off. Don't get me wrong, I can clean it off. It's not stuck there, but I can't reactivate that color because it was watercolor and it dried. If this were gouache, I would be able to reactivate it. Let's see here. Her I need to use this one, olive green, and a little bit of the raw umber deep. Okay. You can tell I use certain colors more than others. Um, Pans get bare spots in them. So these colors I use a lot if I want to tone down one of the brighter colors. So, so yeah, so now I'm gonna use some of this and get this in this green spot here. Add some more water. The other thing I could do is add a little bit of the yellow ochre to help tone it down, but that's not going to get it dark like I want it. Maybe I'll just add some of this over to get that army green. It's very watery. I need to add more color. Maybe a little bit darker green. Oops. There, I'm getting a definite army green there. All right. Let's see here. And her jacket's very dark too. So I don't want to touch her hair because it may still be damp and I don't want it to bleed. And I don't want the green to bleed into her hair. So I'm just going to be very careful. Now this is definitely more of a wet on dry frosty that I'm doing right now. And I'm using a lot of paint, less water. You can see how dark it's coming out. And I'm okay with that because this is a really dark part of her jacket. So I'm just getting this laid in. And one of the ways I'm going to try to bring out that pattern of, it's one of those pattern jackets that look like it's got puffiness to it, patch it, almost like quilted. I'm going to lift up lines of it. Now as I get closer to this side that I'm painting on now, it's lighter. So I'm using more water, less color. You can see the difference. So, and then again, I'm going to do that on this side. I'm going to put more paint in there and less water. Layer it up. Again, this is layering of colors. Darkening her in really will do that. Now I'm going to take a different, I was using this brush. I'm going to use a smaller brush with a, just kind of dampen it. I'm going to come in and try to pull some of the paint out that I just laid down to get the texture of that jacket while it's damp. Very subtle. You might be able to see the lines if I brought it up close. See, I'm pulling out that. And it's very dark pretty quickly, so these lines aren't going to be very brazen the darker I go on the dark side of the jacket. And then I'm going to pull out the horizontal lines of it. And I'm just giving it a suggestion of a quilted jacket in this fashion. I'm not having to paint it in a positive way. I'm kind of pulling out negative space here. And then people see that and say, oh, that's one of those quilted jackets, without actually having to paint it. And then some of this has got some diagonal lines to it. And so I'm just pulling paint out with a wet, paintless brush because it's damp. And then I'm doing some of that here on the sleeve, trying to pull a little bit out. Now, yeah, could you not paint another layer there? Sure. Or you can be more precise with your layers. But if you don't plan it as well, if you're like me and you don't plan it as well, then these methods will help preserve some of those lighter areas. So yeah, I'm just pulling out with a wet brush some of those. See that? And it gives a texture in and of itself. And then I can come in later when it's dry again and do some dark touches to accentuate some of the puffiness of that. And then her pants, I'm going to probably do a nice darker blue, right there, maybe with a touch of black. and get those pants a little darker with another layer. That's all it is. So I don't have a lot of space, but then again, I don't need a lot of space. So I'm putting in the darkest blue with a touch of black. So it's a blue black. And it looks black, but when it comes out, you'll see. Now I've got I don't think you can see it, but I've got a water droplet, and that will definitely drop on the paper if you're not careful. So watch your paintbrush. So now her jeans are definitely darker. And this is something I think that Frosty you would probably do, is this wet on dry and very precise. And that's okay, because that's the way you paint. You would just need to be careful not to use a lot of water, because you would get frustrated. So you want to, you can already see her pant leg is darker just from that. I'm going to lift up some of that color a little bit on the edges of her leg where light would be kind of coming off. So you can see the difference between this leg and that one. And I'm trying to preserve some of the lightness on her shin there, or the shin area, by lifting that up with a whip brush. So, and it's just enough for nuance. And again, I got another water drop on this. I don't want to fall on there. And so I'm going to carry this over. And this is precise work here. I like to do precise work too, but not always. So you don't want to lose this leg is not as dark as the other in terms of shadowing. Yeah. You can see that now. So you can see we've got texture in her jacket. Now you can see I've got this halo effect on her hair to the jacket, but because I know that this is still damp, if I were to touch the ends of her hair with the green would end up going into her hair. And if I tried to fix it, it might lift up the red color. So that's fixable when everything's dry. I'll come in with a precise brush and make some specific paint strokes, so specific locks of hair when it's dry. But you can see how just darkening this a little bit, getting this darker really brings this foreground. Can you hear me now? No audio. Thanks, honey. I ran out of battery on that one. It's a good thing I had the other one backed up. Thanks, guys. Can you hear me now? Yeah, all right. This is why my husband helps me out. He's a good guy. So, yeah, I'm working on her boots now, getting those so she's grounded. Um, they're really in shadows. There's not a lot um, of brightness on them. So, kind of look funny up close. But from far away, they ground her. So this is a good short story. When my sister-in-law does put it out, and I think she's waiting on me to finish this, that's why I'm working on this one. Um, I'll share the link out with everybody, and you can go read the short story. It's actually it lives up to the name of short story, and very interesting, very interesting plot. I liked it very much. So, so I've got her boots going, but you can see I don't have any shadows here yet. I mean, I've got a touch of a shadow of my first layer, but that's not that's not a good enough shadow. And a shadow, you don't want it to be too specific. You want it to have fuzzy edges. So that's where you kind of get more finessed with your water control. So like this, I'm going to use more of a black. So I'm going to use a little bit more water. I may have to layer this up. And then I use water on the edges, kind of keep them fuzzy. And if that's too much, I take my tissue and I lift it up. This is very wet, so I'm not worried about hard lines just yet. And I did touch the boot, and you can see I touched the boot, which was still wet, with the shadow color. You can see that it's now lightening up because the water came up into this. And you know what? I'm not too worried about it because when it dries, I can come in and make changes. And in fact, I could probably just lift it all up and let it be a layer. And that's the thing that when you work on something like this and you keep working and you realize that you've done about what you can do with everything still wet, um, you could accidentally pick up color again, and you don't want to do that. And so you can just bring up the color again and like let it dry and come back at it. It can be very forgiving. A lot of people mistake it as unforgiving, but it's actually very forgiving once you practice with it and get to a point where um, you understand the wet on wet, the wet on damp, and the wet on dry. And you would think with the wet on wet and the wet on damp would have the same effect, but it doesn't. And that's why you should definitely um, be careful and practice with it. Let's see here. How does this feel? Now this is feeling pretty dry here. and it's not cold dry anymore, which tells me that this is probably dry enough I can paint lines on it and not have it be a wet and damp. Let's see if I'm right with that. I'm going to let's see. Yeah, it did not spread. It did not cauliflower. So it's, see, in the span of time that I've been talking to you since I first touched this, this is dry. So that tells you how fast it dries, Frosty. So, so now I'm going to work on some of these lines in the boards since it's dry. This one's definitely, I got a bead of water on this. So I'm going to take that off. I don't want it to fall in and make a puddle or anything like that. Some of these boards are thicker and thinner. So I'm going to let my brush work vary. You can see because it's fully dry, my lines are very distinct. If this were still damp, this would bleed out into the board areas. And I'm just touching this, just gentle, trying to get different thickness and thinness, that these boards are irregular, and maybe there's some knots in it, because you want it to have a distinct wood feel. And the closer it is to you, the wider the boards are, so you want it thicker, you know. And you want some edge work here to be done. Again, you're making different touches of lines there to kind of get a wood feel. It's already coming together. Already coming together. Wow, is it 9:25 already? Holy cow. The time went by so quick. But you can see the progress I've made with it. And I actually didn't do a lot. It doesn't seem like I did anyway, but I worked mainly in this foreground. Um, and the branches that I did the sponge work, it's not very obvious yet. I'm trying to show it. But that's when layering with the sponge will come in handy. So I'll come in again with the same sponge and another layer when this is dry. Wet on dry is good for textures. Wet on wet is not. If you want soft edges, soft color variation, wet on wet or wet on damp is your way to go. If you want delineated textures, delineated colors, you want wet on dry, and you still need to work in layers. So, but anyway, that is me doing watercolor. I don't think I've ever really done a watercolor on a live stream. So that's something new. And I did talk about the various things that I've been using on this watercolor painting. And if my sister-in-law is watching, she's watching this in progress because she's going to get this when it's done. Um, so yeah, um, I'll probably have Ron scan it into Photoshop and probably extend this down, maybe extend this up so she's got space for her title or whatever. Um, because, you know, the best I can do is what I put on the paper. But thankfully, Ron's good at extending things so that there's room to make a title up here if she wanted to do it, and then her name down here or something like that. So yeah, but there we go. Let me go back to, there we go. So there we are. So yeah, now I'm going to put this up here so you can see. So you can see, and then the brightness, the harsh light, it really washes out because I'm right up against the light there. But the further back you can see. So I brought her forward, just getting her and another layer of dark coloration, and the deck work. So yeah, I'm excited to have worked on that tonight. I'm glad it worked out with that. Um, Let me explain real quick what I'm going to be doing with these next ones. I'll pull this up. This is my Nancy Wake painting. You can see her. I've got the signage mapped out. So to the size, I used some, this is vellum. And so I kind of drew on the vellum the size of the poster. And so I wanted to make sure I had things mapped out. So when I go to actually paint into this, I know where I'm placing the letters. Um, and same with this French cursive. The French cursive is going to go here. In fact, I think I'm going to take down palette cam real quick and do palette cam so you guys can see. Okay. So, there we go. Real quick. Back this up. So yeah. So you can see the face is coming, the hair is coming along great. I did fix her hand from what it was. I got the shadow of the hand from the lights. Again, this is a window reflection. I will work on that too. And this is going to be a light pole that's in the shape of a black chess queen. But it's going to be very subtle, like I said, because this is dark green, this is black. It's going to be very subtle, but it's going to be a chess piece. It's going to be the queen, kind of being symbolic of her. And this signage here that I have that says La souris blanche était ici. The white mouse was here. Um, so it's a taunting thing. And then, so yeah, and then the wanted poster that is 5 million francs wanted. So I'm going to get that on there. I did work on the map some the other day. And like I said, I need to work on this now, the arm and this and the background. So there's plenty of work to do on her. And then of course there's my Amazon. I worked on her some over since last Wednesday. You can see some of the work in her outfit that I did. I got some of this blocked in where it wasn't before. So I got her necklace blocked in. It's not got the highlights yet, and her earring and some of the beadwork in her hair. I got some of the flowers blocked in the foreground. So there's still a lot of work to do on her, but it's coming along as well. So, but yeah, not bad for a night's job. So I'll go back to. All right. So anyway, there you have it, boys and girls. So I thank you for joining me. It's been really good. I'm going to turn down this light now. It seems to be too bright. I started off with it too dark, and now it's too bright. Anyway, thank you guys for joining me tonight. And thanks for the questions. It was good to have questions so I can explain what I'm doing. I'm not very, I can be a good teacher in some topics, but I don't ever profess to be a teacher of art. I don't feel, even though I've got a degree in art, I don't feel like I'm qualified. Like I've spent too much time out of it that who am I to teach anyone how to do art? So I tend to step back from that. But I'm glad you asked questions. Um, applause, applause. You are so funny, honey. I love you. I love my husband. He's in the chat. my husband's crazy bear for you. And if you're ever in the chat, he's in there. You can say hey to him and watch him on Saturday night at 7 p.m. on Lady Hamilton Art Rumble channel. Um, that would be great. But anyway, thanks for joining. Have a wonderful evening. Please like this video if you would, please. Share this video if you would, please. Please leave a comment. Do all the things for the algorithm. I would appreciate it. Whatever you can do and will do and willing to do, I'm grateful for. And what you don't do, it's okay. I'm glad you joined me. And if you're watching and you didn't join in the chat, that's okay. I'm a lurker most of the time too. I don't tend to comment, so I understand. But anyway, I promise that if I'm not working on this next week, I'm working on one of the other two. There's plenty of work now to go around. So you guys have a good rest of the week. Have a good weekend. I will be live streaming again next Wednesday, God willing. And we'll see what I'm doing then. So you guys have a great one. Thanks again, and good night.